Invest Africa, proudly brought to you by KPMG.
Hello and a warm welcome to this week's edition of Invest Africa. I'm Natasha Jacobs. Now, manufacturing is recognized as an important driver of economic growth for African economies. Even as governments begin to support and build production capacity, there are many challenges, and manufacturing still accounts for a very small percentage of GDP. Philani Nyalunga takes a look at the pitfalls and the potential that manufacturing holds for the continent.
It's an African innovation that's taking the medical world by storm. The Lodox is a full-body high-speed digital X-ray scanner. It takes just 13 seconds, allowing for quick diagnosis, which leads to faster treatment. The Lodox is designed and manufactured in South Africa. Experts say it's the type of innovation in manufacturing that will propel African economies to the next level of growth.
If I were to take the various sectors, let's call it the services sector, the primary sector in manufacturing, so in mining and agriculture, those are the sectors that are driving the growth in Africa. Manufacturing is not the driver of growth at this stage, and this is why it's important to say, how can that complement the growth that's occurring, so that we don't end up just being a services economy dependent on imports of goods and then dependent on the vagaries of the global economy.
Innovation and technology leads to increased productivity. However, in Africa, the manufacturing sector is not a consistent contributor to the gross domestic product. Only 1% of the world's goods are made here. There are many reasons for this, including high labor costs and a small skills base.
The only manufacturer of a commercial X-ray machine in Africa. And that makes it quite challenging as well. Resources is quite difficult to get to, skills that we need to get, it's quite expensive for us and difficult to get to. And then also components, certain components that we use, we need to import a big part of our machines' raw material because it's just not available on the continent or in South Africa.
The United Nations Conference of Trade and Development recently called on governments to do more to support and grow their manufacturing sectors. Experts say infrastructure development will attract investors to the sector.
To achieve the economies of scale needed to be competitive, skills is obviously a critical component of being competitive and productive, so that one can actually compete in the world. That's important. But I think it's also important to try and establish the natural linkages that are there and try and cut some of the barriers. And it's basically cross-border trade that's one of the bigger barriers within the African context because of the blockage.
Lodox manages to overcome the skills barrier by investing in training young people.
We do have the necessary basic skill levels in the country. However, to produce a Lodox machine, we need a unique combination of those skills, specifically in the electronic and the IT sectors. So what we tend to do is we tend to take on younger people and we train them in depth for about 6 months to a year in order for them to become competent enough to work as a production resource or a service technician for Lodox.
Manufacturing creates jobs, and as many African countries look ahead, boosting and supporting manufacturing is becoming a key economic agenda. And there is wider recognition that public-private partnerships is what will drive this goal. Philani Nyalunga, CNBC Africa, Johannesburg.
Now joining me in studio to give context to the murky issues and the state of manufacturing on the continent is Kunrad Besaidnout, Executive Director at the Manufacturing Circle. And also joining the debate is the CEO of NAMPAC, Andrew Marshall. Welcome, gentlemen. Now, Kunrad, I'm going to start with you. Now, according to a recent report from the UN Conference on Trade and Development, Africa accounts for only 1% of global manufacturing, and about 10% of Africa's GDP is accounted to manufacturing. That's a scary statistic when we're resource rich. We're sitting with a continent of 1 billion, and we're regarded as the final investment frontier. So much potential, but so much disconnect. Why is that?
Well, if you regard it as a final investment frontier, it must make you very excited because it speaks to all the potential that is left in Africa. But You know, I think people recognize that many of the economies on the continent are still factor-driven. There's still a lot of way to go in terms of developing the continent and its manufacturing capacity to get to a point where it becomes more about efficiency and innovation. We're still years away as far as that's concerned, which makes it both exciting but also very challenging.
Now, Andrew, Nampak is a South Africa-based economy with a footprint across 12 of its African neighbours. As a player on the ground, how tough has it been to build and scale your operations across the territories?
Yeah, Africa has become very big for us. Africa is now 30% of our business, and that's grown from under 10% 5 years ago. So it certainly has its challenges, but equally those challenges create big barriers to entry for other players to come into Africa. So we see that actually as an opportunity to grow and entrench ourselves in the African markets. And certainly our target is for Africa to make up more than 50% of our business in the next 5 years.
Now, it's not just about manufacturing as a business. It contributes to the economy, there's job creation. And historically, we haven't seen a country develop from poor to rich without building a strong manufacturing base. We've seen this in Japan, Taiwan, Malaysia, and closer to home, we've seen this in even little Mauritius. Now, if that's the basis for economic growth, why aren't we as a continent paying enough attention to manufacturing? Because with the data out there, I mean, we've got a PMI for Nigeria, we've got a PMI for South Africa, but not much data out there in any of the other territories.
You're right, Natasha, the data and the linkages are still quite weak. But I think that there are players both on the ground, such as Nampak, and higher up, that recognize that are either ready to deal with the challenges or want to address the challenges. I can just, for instance, mention that the UN Economic Commission for Africa has certainly started doing some excellent work and has recently hired quite a bit of staff to address the shortage of data and to put the systems in place to try and develop those. It doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight, but certainly, and there are recognitions both at regional structures on the continent as well as national structures such as the African Union, that we need to do more to encourage manufacturing on the continent. For if we do not focus on it, Africa will be the loser in the longer term.
Now, it's all about economies of scale, and to be competitive in the manufacturing industry, you need to be productive and be able to produce enough. Now, if we look at the numbers, and again, I refer to the UN Conference's Africa Trade Report, the average manufacturing company in sub-Saharan Africa has 47 employees, compared to 171 in Malaysia, 195 in Vietnam, and 393 in Thailand. Surely the small size of operations is an impediment to growing the scale of economies.
I think there's an impediment in terms of data. I accept the point that you and Kunrad are making. But if I just give you some anecdotal numbers to give you a sense of some of these markets. In South Africa, if you go back 10 years, we were selling about 25 billion cigarettes a year. That number's about 20 billion cigarettes a year.
That's a swear word these days.
It is. And in fact, but it wouldn't be to the cigarette manufacturers. But the numbers have reduced because of the increasing health and increasing affluence, which you would expect in a first world market. But over that same 5-year period, cigarette consumption in Nigeria has grown from 8 billion cigarettes to 22. We now sell more cigarette boxes in Nigeria than we do in South Africa. So there may not be data on the GDP and stuff that people would like, but just a sense of the Nigerian cigarette consumption is now bigger than South Africa. If I give you another market, Angola, in South Africa, you know, we sell 2.5 odd billion cans, beverage cans a year. In Angola, when we started up 3 years ago, there was no market. We've now run out of capacity on our first line, doing 800 million cans a year, and we're having to add another line. So it just gives you a sense that, you know, I've no doubt in the future that Angola will be a lot closer to the South African number. Whether it'll pass it with a smaller population, unlikely. But on the ground, there's huge growth in consumption of all manufactured goods, because we're obviously only selling to manufacturers, whether they're packaging cigarettes or beer or Coca-Cola. We are supplying those particular companies. So certainly there's growth happening, and in some of the markets like Nigeria, Angola, where they do have big markets and reasonable sized populations, I think we'll see that number that you just quoted of employees per company growing quite significantly.
And one can perhaps just add on the whole question of scale, is that one must not forget that part of the reason that these markets are growing so quickly is that because in Africa we find the most people that are going to be urbanizing over the next decade. Close to 1 billion people are going to urbanize in Africa over the next decade, which means not only fast-moving consumable goods, the goods of the kind of nature that Nampak packages, but also durable goods, pots, pans, knives, forks, if you need a trellis door for your home, all those kind of things.
So anything and everything?
Anything and everything that an urbanized population needs and uses. Furniture, all those things, are the demand for that's going to escalate quite significantly over the next decade, which obviously for manufacturers that are already on the continent presents significant opportunity.
Now let's talk a bit about the growth nodes outside of South Africa. Nigeria is the second largest economic player, soon to take us over. How's the growth nodes in the other territories outside of South Africa progressing, and could we see South Africa become the little brother instead of the big brother?
Well, it certainly is possible. I mean, generally, and Andrew will be able to give you a much more specific perspective than I am able to, but from the like sort of the general research that we've done amongst our members at the manufacturing circle, of which Nampak incidentally is also a part.
Good to have you both there.
Is to say that many of them still find it quite a challenge to enter some of these markets and quite expensive. And that you'll find, for instance, in Mozambique, that they won't attack the entire market, but that they'll look at Maputo and Tet, where there's a lot of industrial development happening and resources being developed. And then, of course, you have mentioned Nigeria, which is important in terms of West Africa, but in Eastern Africa, they are making huge strides with regards to competitiveness. Kenya is described as a very competitive manufacturing destination by manufacturers in South Africa, which we should realize is something that we should pay attention to. Just in terms of industrial policy, many African economies have not only already discovered it, but are already starting to use it to their advantage. Just a little bit to the north of us in Botswana, they are busy developing special economic zones of the nature that we are contemplating for South Africa, and they know that they should compete with us, so it certainly warms up the game.
Andrew, give us the Nampak perspective as a company on the ground.
Yeah, we see the growth nodes as being Nigeria, as you say, for obvious reasons. Huge population, 160 million, and growing dramatically. Angola is just enormous. Anyone who hasn't been to Angola should visit.
Let's talk about the language barrier though. Angola, Portuguese country, similar to Mozambique with the language. Is that a deterrent when doing business there?
It's not, because we simply put Portuguese-speaking employees in place, and we recruit people who can speak Portuguese, and if we can't, we train them to speak Portuguese. So no, it's not a big barrier at all. That market is growing exponentially, and anyone who visited Dubai during the boom times, if you visit Luanda now, that's what it looks like. It's just a silhouette of cranes, and the whole economy is doing well. It's not confined to manufacturing or oil. It's retail, it's infrastructure, it's everything. Obviously on the east side, as Kunrad mentioned, Kenya, a very strong country, and actually much further developed than let's say the west side. So certainly a much stronger manufacturing base. We find it much more competitive there, very strong Asian influence, and very competitive as a result. The big opportunity in the east is in Ethiopia. We've opened up there. Tiger Brands, out of interest, are a big player there as well. And certainly that's an enormous population coming off a very low base, and all the big players, Heineken, Coke, Pepsi, have all gone in there. Out of interest, the biggest bottler, the main bottler in Ethiopia, is actually a South African bottler who's gone into Ethiopia, and we're already supplying them now with product for like crates and things. So in terms of the big opportunities, we see Nigeria, Ethiopia and Angola as offering the biggest opportunities. But having said that, we see opportunities in Kenya, Tanzania, and all the markets we operate. Those are just the big ones.